The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Wisdom and perspective can transform difficult realities into opportunities for learning. Tonight, two conversations from our Canada Day show earlier this season that do just that. First, human rights and child welfare advocate Cindy Blackstock on what the unmarked graves of Indigenous children have to teach all Canadians. Then, Madam Justice Rosalie Abella, now retired, on lessons from her improbable path to the highest court in the land. It's Monday, September 6th, and that's tonight on The Agenda. Unmarked graves is not a phrase that many in Canada expect to hear associated with the actions of their own government. But in the past few months, that's exactly what has come to light for all to see. The truth of what happened in residential schools to Indigenous children, and which still reverberates in their families and communities, well, it's devastating and frankly makes demands of us all to confront it and to learn. And with us to help with that, we're joined on this Canada Day from Prince George, British Columbia, by Cindy Blackstock, Executive Director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. She's a professor at the School of Social Work at McGill University, and we are delighted to welcome you back to our airwaves, Cindy Blackstock. How do we find you on this day?
Well, it's a day of real reconciliation in many ways. We're trying to reconcile the values of Canada, the justice, the fairness, the respect, the honoring, with the lived reality, and sadly, the reality that far too many First Nations children died with in these residential schools. And then there's another piece of reconciliation that needs to happen, Stephen, and I think in some ways it's even more difficult for Canadians, and that is to realize that the injustices are continuing on our watch. But that's the real learning opportunity, because that's something we can seriously do something about.
Let me pick up on that phrase, learning opportunity, because I suspect for many Canadians, the revelations of the last couple of months of these children's grave sites, that will be news to them. I also suspect that it's not at all news to people in Indigenous communities across this country. And I just want to ask you, how widely known was this among Indigenous communities? Because clearly it wasn't among the rest of us.
Right. It was widely known. Everyone knew about it. And it was also another area where it was widely known is within the government of Canada itself. I mean, Stephen, in 1907, Canada's chief medical health officer of the Indian Department, Dr. Bryce, went out and surveyed the health of the kids in the residential schools and found that the government of Canada was funding these kids for healthcare, way lesser levels than everybody else. And the health practices were terrible. And that was contributing to death rates of 25% in 1 year, rising to 50% in over 3 years. And in one school, for every 3 children that walked in, only 1 walked out alive. The doctor said, equalize the health funding and improve these healthcare practices and these kids could live. And Canada chose not to do it. They chose to retaliate against their own public health officer. And this was carried in the media. There was headlines like, children dying like flies, absolute inattention to the bare necessities of health. So the editors and the media were paying attention. And some of the public were too. There was a lawyer named Samuel Hume Blake that said that in that Canada fails to obviate the preventable causes of death, it brings itself into unpleasant nearness with manslaughter. And we see this in the whole history of residential schools, where persons of all walks of life, hunters who would find the kids in the woods beaten, people within the department itself, people who even operated the churches or neighbors would report abuse and the deaths of these kids, and Canada would choose not to do it. So Canada knew about it all the time. The communities knew about it. But when the community spoke, it was so confrontational to people's ideas of what this country was like. They would often just dismiss them and turn away. And that's what we need to make sure doesn't happen this time. People can't look away.
The language you are using is the language one associates with a crime scene. And if, in fact, these residential schools were crime scenes, what are the forward-facing implications of that?
Well, it's not just my language. Dr. Bryce in 1922, after he was pushed out of the public service, he published a pamphlet, Stephen, that's called A National Crime. And it detailed all of his efforts to try and get the Canadian government to pay attention. I think what it really means is that the federal government and the churches ought to be looked at for their institutional and possibly criminal roles in the residential schools. There are individuals who also should be held accountable, but the institutions themselves ought to be also get the critical lens of whether or not there was criminal wrongdoing by these institutions, particularly because as early as 1908, we have a lawyer saying Canada, for one, brought itself into unpleasant nearness with manslaughter. The question remains, was it manslaughter?
Well, presumably, I mean, the institutions are still around to be held accountable. Presumably, the people who actually did these things are all dead. So how do you hold them to account?
Well, not all of them, sadly, Stephen, because you got to remember the last residential school closed in 1996. So there are people around today who would have staffed those institutions. And they ought, to the degree possible, they ought to be held responsible. But what we also need to do is we need to find out, even for those perpetrators that have passed on, what did they do? And more importantly, what happened to the kids that they victimized? So that we can set a true telling of history so that we can learn from it and come closer to realizing the values of the country. And get rid of these chasms, because colonialism did two things. One is, of course, all these horrendous injustices and deaths of these children and that continue in some form today. And then on the other side was this complete erasure of history by the Canadian government to keep Canadians in the dark. Because the view was, if Canadians actually understood what was happening to these kids, they would be like Blake and they would be like Bryce, and they'd be outraged and they'd be speaking and demanding change. And the government did not want that to happen. So the non-Indigenous population was also victimized by this colonialism because it was robbed of its opportunity to do better.
I should ask you a bit of a strange question here, which is, are you a lawyer?
No, I'm a social worker, but as you know, Stephen, I've for 14 and a half years been litigating against Canada.
Well, that's why I asked.
Equitable services today.
That's why I asked.
I got a law degree to learn how to do that better. So yeah, I have a law degree, but I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, because I mean, I knew you're a PhD in social work, but of course, I and so many others always associate you with the work that you're doing in the courts. So let's go there. What are you working on now?
Well, what a lot of folks don't know is, remember those healthcare inequities that Dr. Bryce pointed to, linking to the deaths? Well, they were never fixed. The federal government funds First Nations public services and does so at far lesser levels than everyone else. That's why we got things like no water on some First Nations reserves. And in 2000, when I was fresh on the national scene, I bounced on there and I thought, you know, we're going to document these inequalities with the federal government. We're going to cost out solutions and we're going to show them how they're creating harms to these children, even to harms where they were driving them into foster care because families didn't have the help they needed to recover from the trauma of residential schools at greater numbers than the residential schools. So we did all that. And the government welcomed the report, said they review it, and then they did nothing. I got sucked in a second time and we did another report, same result. So in 2007, we filed a human rights complaint along with the Assembly of First Nations against Canada, alleging that what they were doing was racially discriminatory. Canada fought that case tooth and nail all the way. And then finally in 2016, we got the decision that substantiated the discrimination and ordered Canada to stop. The tribunal found that not only was Canada's discrimination pushing kids unnecessarily into foster care, it was resulting in serious harms and even the deaths of some children. Canada agreed with the decision, and then they did exactly what they did with those reports. They ignored it. So now, fast forward past the TRC, where equity and child welfare and something called Jordan's Principle, which is to ensure equitable public services are given to First Nations kids. Those are the top calls to action. Fast forward to now, we've had 19 non-compliance and procedural orders against the feds. And just last couple weeks ago, we were in federal court where they were trying to overturn some of the tribunal's orders to get them closer to justice. So the feds continue to fight tooth and nail against this generation of kids.
I'd be very interested in your theory as to why you think that's happening, given that the current Prime Minister says reconciliation with Indigenous communities is his top agenda.
Yeah, I don't get it. And I also didn't get it the week before we were in the federal court hearings, the Prime Minister was on the floor of Parliament saying he was not fighting Indigenous children in court. And I was thinking, well, then why are we going to court next week? And the public can just tune in and watch this. It's almost like they're in an alternate kind of QAnon reality sometimes. What gives me some hope is that the Canadian public seems to be far out in front of the federal government on this one. Like, the federal government is really still operating from a deeply colonial place. In fact, Stephen, we don't have to look far to look at that. We can look at the contemporary inequalities and the non-compliance with the law, but we can also look at that racist Indian Act that was used to push kids into residential schools. It's still on the books, despite there being a plan to get rid of it, released in 1996. So I think it's that colonialism that just pervades their minds. They just can't reconcile the fact that they themselves are doing the injustice. They'd rather look at it in the past so that they don't have to really do anything other than apologize and send hopes and prayers.
You did mention the TRC a moment ago, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I want to follow up on that because not long ago on this program, I think it was about 6 months ago, we did convene a group of Indigenous leaders. And I want to play you just a little snippet from that program. This is, I think, the youngest member of that group, Gabrielle Fayon, from A7G, you know, Gabrielle. It's a grassroots organization based in Ottawa, and let's just take a look at that, and then we'll come back and chat.
I do believe that reconciliation is ultimately the responsibility of Canadians. It is not up to Indigenous people to repair the harms that Canadians have done to Indigenous peoples. And right now, what we're seeing is that the burden is falling on the shoulders of Indigenous people, and that's just not fair. A lot of young people that I work with actually believe that reconciliation is dead.
A lot of young people think reconciliation is dead. What would you say to Gabrielle?
I think she's right. She's right. You know, I hear so often from government leaders and others that, you know, yes, it was bad, it happened, it was a dark chapter in our history. That's a speech given by the wrongdoers. The wrongdoers give that speech when they don't want to do the work to set things right, and particularly when they're accountable for the perpetration of ongoing injustices. I think that there hasn't been the type of heavy lifting that the Prime Minister Harper promised in the apology to residential schools in 2008, where he said the burden of this whole thing will be lifted from the shoulders of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and placed on the shoulders of the government and Canadians. That didn't really happen. It's still sitting, the weight is still on our shoulders. And while we absolutely need to take accountability and provide leadership and tell people how problems can be fixed, it's up to Canadians to pile on to those solutions and not let governments get away with saying, oh, we're going to review this, or like they did with the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We're going to, after 2 years, we're going to create a plan for a plan to implement the solutions. We have to hold them accountable for that stuff.
Does it feel to you as if this time it's different? When you've seen the reaction of non-Indigenous Canadians to the discovery of these mass graves, discovery for them, not for you, but for them, does it feel different this time?
Yeah, you know, I think the stories have piled up on the Canadian consciousness in a way that makes it difficult to look away. And one of the real, the epicenters of colonialism is this savage and civilized dichotomy, where everything that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit do is savage, and everything that other people do is civilized. And through that, we become dehumanized. I think people, when they think about 3-year-olds buried in unmarked graves, dying alone, away from their families, that just gets at their humanity in a way that cuts through that colonial dichotomy. in a way that was not possible before. But I think we need to credit those residential school survivors for the courage of coming forward and telling their truths. And I use the word truths versus stories, because I think we called them stories. It's almost so that we wouldn't have to listen to them because they were so comforting to us, but they are truths.
I want to circle back to somebody that you referenced at the beginning of our conversation, and that's Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce. Who is a person of immense significance in the history of this country, and yet who I suspect doesn't have a statue to him anywhere. But you know who he is. I'll get you to speak to this, Cindy Blackstock, if you would. That's you. Where are you? And who is that? Who's there?
Yeah, that's that we're in Beechwood Cemetery in the lands of unceded Algonquin territory. And I'm facing the grave of Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce. I first came to see him, Stephen, the day before Prime Minister Harper apologized. I found that he was buried just a few miles away from where I live. So I went and I got a bouquet of brightly colored flowers. And I went to thank him for what he did, because he had the moral courage of standing up for these kids when it really mattered. And I thanked him, and I told him that, maybe not coincidentally, that exactly 100 years after his 1907 report, we filed that human rights case. And I told him about the case, and I told him I'd be back when the kids won. And I would go back from time to time to just be inspired by him, to try and just feel what else could I do to do a better job for these kids, because sometimes I felt like I was screaming into silence. And while I was there, I thought he needed a bigger garden around his grave. So I got my shovel out and some friends, and we put a garden. And now, children are learning about him. His family has unveiled a historical plaque at Beechwood telling the story. And he's become one of the most visited graves at Beechwood. So people are going there just as I did, to become inspired by this early example of reconciliation and action.
So note to people watching or listening to this, if you're in the nation's capital over the summertime, this would be a good place to go. Now, I gather his gravesite is not that far away from Duncan Scott's. Who is he?
Yes.
Who was he?
Yeah, most of your viewers would have learned about him like I did in English literature class. He was a Confederate poet, but his day job for 52 years was really heading up the residential school file. He was hired by John A. Macdonald himself, and he rose quickly through the ranks. He was the man who said no to Dr. Bryce, who refused those reforms. And he's buried just over the hill from Dr. Bryce. Now, Duncan Campbell Scott had a plaque. And I went to see his gravesite just before the TRC report, and it was glowing, recipient of honorary degrees, Confederate poet. I thought to myself, this one needs a revision. So we worked with Beechwood, we worked with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Murray Wilson, and historian John Malloy, and now his plaque reads Confederate poet and cultural genocide.
And what about Dr. Bryce's? Has he got a plaque?
He's got a plaque, yeah. And it talks about him not only in his role of residential schools, but also, Stephen, this is really important for people to know. He wrote Ontario's first health code. This guy was at the top of his profession. He was the president of the American Public Health Association, founder of the Canadian Public Health Association. He really led and set the foundation for public health, which we were all benefiting by in COVID-19. And yet he was completely erased from Canadian history because the Canadian government didn't want anybody to know about him.
Do you have any theories as to why Dr. Bryce would have been so with it and forward-thinking at a time when everybody else was so backward-thinking?
Well, here's the interesting thing, Stephen, is I'm finding not everybody else was backward-thinking. When his report was leaked to the media, editors of newspapers all over the country put it on the front page, and you'll know this, you're from the generation of newspapers like I am, above the fold, where you put the big news. People up there, I think sometimes what we think is, they didn't know any better back then. That's why they did those things. But the truth is, when you put people in conversation with one another, you find that people knew it was immoral, and it quite possibly is illegal. The problem was, just as it is now, is that people know it, but not enough of us speak out long enough, and hold those accountable for change, and don't look away until the change happens on the ground. Look past the announcements. Politicians say all kinds of stuff. I don't really listen to what they say. I watch what they do.
You know, while we're on the subject of honoring those who came before us in history, I would love your take on something that is just absolutely white hot right now in this country, and that is the issue of course, for example, taking down statues of Sir Johnny MacDonald, taking down statues of Edgerton Ryerson, changing the name potentially of that university as well. What's your view on all of that?
Well, you know what? I think colonialism was the biggest cancel culture. It erased people like Dr. Bryce, and it erased all those children that we're discovering in the ground. I believe in a full and balanced telling of history. And so in the case of Beechwood, what we've done is we've really tried to really reconcile these people as individuals in their time. But we put them in conversation with one another to hold them accountable to the standards of that period. When we have statues, it's kind of like a celebration of that person. Like I walk by the statue of Laurier on Parliament Hill en route to the memorial for the 215 kids. Laurier was prime minister when Dr. Bryce released that 1907 report, and yet he did nothing about it. But he gets a complete pass in history. I think if you're going to leave his statue where it is, you need to tell the full story of what he did. And we also need to recognize not all legacies are equal. So, for example, in Duncan Campbell Scott, yes, he has a poetic legacy, but that's eclipsed by the residential school legacy he left. So too with other political leaders. It's not that they did all these good things and this one bad thing. It's the weight of the legacies they left us.
In which case, in our remaining moments here, I do want to ask you on this Canada Day about, well, what we have to celebrate or maybe what we don't have to celebrate. And to that end, I want to read a quote here from Chief Philip Franks of the Wata Mohawk community in the Muskoka region, who had the following to say: "I would only hope that the people who have cottages, parts of which were a part of Wata lands but taken away 100 years ago by the same government mentality, will reflect on the whole issue. As a sign of respect, it would certainly help relationships if there were no fireworks celebrations. I do understand some may regard this as a cancel culture, as recently coined, but really, whose culture was canceled? I appreciate your thoughts and efforts to help in educating the populace. We have been trying to do so for a long time." Now, I gather cottagers, for example, on Gibson Lake near the Wata Mohawk community in Muskoka have lowered their flags to half-mast, and then they had, generally speaking, decided to adhere to the advice of Chief Franks and not to have fireworks. Admittedly, as people watch this or listen to this, Canada Day is almost over, but what kind of thing would you recommend as well?
You know, I think too often in Canada we have lazy patriotism. I live right in Ottawa, right in the middle of Canada Day every year, whether I like it or not. And I see people painting flags on their faces, holding flags, wearing red and white, and they're obviously really proud. But when I see them do that, I think, what are you actually standing up for? And when you ask them, it's kind of like the values, it's a great country. And I think, okay, well, on this Canada Day, you got to really reflect on questions of justice. You got to really reflect on questions of honesty. You have to really reflect on questions of democracy, because now more than ever, democracy is needed to end these injustices. I'd like to see people really hold themselves account to enacting those values. We can't just send people off to war to defend those values and then give them away in times of peacetime and ignore the injustices in our midst. Real patriotism is when we embrace what hurts and make sure that we honor those residential school survivors by implementing those TRC's calls to action. That's what I'm going to be doing this Canada Day.
I wonder if I can follow up with what is admittedly a bit of a chippy question. And in doing so, I'm hearkening back to an interview that I did with Michael Ignatieff on this program several months ago, in which he said, we need to be able to have two competing thoughts in our heads at the same time. Namely, number one, yes, the legacy that this country has to overcome is immense, and we need to do that work, PDQ. But he also said, look around the world, and we can also say at the same time that Canada is, relative to other countries, one of the most successful and just countries anywhere in the world. Are those competing yet simultaneously held views possible for you?
You know, there's a thing in psychology that whatever you say after the but is actually what you really mean. And that's been the problem in those competing ideas, is that people have said, well, Canada is such a great country, and that means I can set this aside, these children aside, the past injustices and the current injustices. I would say in order to give that second part of the truth meaning, the fact that Canada is a just country, you must deal with this other reality. That should be the difference between Canada and the rest of the world, is that we don't look away and ignore it. Not only the historical realities, but also much harder, the current ones. And I would hope that every Canadian would have a copy of the TRC's calls to action. And when politicians of all stripes come to their doors during next federal election, ask every candidate how they're going to implement all 94 and tell them to stop fighting kids in court and stop fighting residential school survivors. Steve, they're fighting St. Anne's residential school survivors where there was an electric chair. They're using our tax dollars to fight against these people. That has to stop.
Yeah, I don't get that, frankly. Does that make any sense to you at all? I mean, any sense at any level?
You know, it feels mean to me. You know, the government was holding all these news conferences, in my view, time to try and distract from what they were doing in federal court against the kids, like this, oh, well, we can put First Nations names on passports. I was at a news conference with residential school survivors from St. Anne's. And all they want is peace. They want someone to recognize their truths. Yeah, they didn't die in residential school, but what they experienced was like a torture camp. And instead of having the government of Canada make all these flowery pronouncements about reconciliation and wearing orange shirts and wearing more regalia than even I wear, what they want is for them to stop fighting them in court and give them justice. That's the least we can give them as a country.
And if you're watching this program, you know, we're on TVO. St. Anne's was in Ontario. This is not that far away from our collective experience. Well, in our last few seconds here, let me just let me ask you this final question. Do you think you can see a day in the not too distant future when you will feel like celebrating Canada Day because you think this country has taken the steps it needs to take?
I hope so. It depends on how long people are going to watch. What we know from Dr. Bryce is, and what I've seen even in our work with the current generation of kids, is while the headlines are there, the politicians pay attention. But when the headlines die and the public attention goes to other things, that's when the injustices continue. So as long as we keep this focus, all of us as people, every single person holds the government to account for ending these injustices, hold the churches account for what they did, then yes, we can do it. And I see it in the kids when they're learning about this stuff in school and they don't normalize it. They think, what the heck? We have an Indian Act and we're fighting residential school survivors in court. And we make excuses when we don't get clean water and we tell people they have to wait 5 years. That doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense. They're right. So we can change it.
Cindy Blackstock, we can't thank you enough for spending so much time with us here on TVO on this Canada Day. You've given us an immense amount to think about, and I'm sure we will. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen.
Imagine you're a movie producer and someone brought you this script. Young girl born in a displaced persons camp in Germany, in the shadow of the Holocaust after the end of World War II. 5 years later, family makes it to Canada. Child goes to public school, eventually becomes a lawyer. At 29 and pregnant, she's appointed the youngest judge in Canadian history. Eventually, she spends more than a decade and a half on the Supreme Court of Canada. If you were a movie studio, you'd throw that script away, right? Because the story is just too unbelievable. But that is the life story of Madam Justice Rosalie Abella, who is about to retire from the Supreme Court, and she joins us now from the nation's capital. Madam Justice, it is great to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you so much for giving me prospects for my retirement. I hadn't even thought about a movie script. And
well, as I say, it
so
wouldn't help
because who should it star, Steve?
Well, as I say, the story is too fabulous to be believable, so it doesn't matter. This movie's not going to get made. It's But here's the real life that we're going to get into right now. Can you describe for us, because I know a lot of people won't know the story, the circumstances of your birth?
When the war ended, my parents, who had gotten married on September the 3rd, 1939, ended up in concentration camps for most of the Second World War. They had a child who was killed at Treblinka. My father's whole family was killed at Treblinka. Remarkably, when the war ended, my mother survived, as did her mother, my grandmother, who lived with us all of her life. And she found out when they walked back from Buchenwald to the city that she and my grandmother and father were living in, Ostrowiec in Poland, that my father was still alive and that he was in a concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, Theresienstadt. So she rode the rails down to Theresienstadt, found out that the camp was quarantined with typhoid epidemic and nobody was allowed in. So if you knew my mother at all, it won't surprise you to learn that she snuck into the camp with a garbage detail, found my father at the back of the camp listening to the radio because they were listing the names of survivors, and snuck him out of the camp. They spent, she said, 3 days in Prague. He had lost maybe 40 pounds. She said he was very frail. And then went back to Poland, where my mother had a factory. My mother's family had a factory. My father was a lawyer, but never got to practice law because he finished 1938 and the war started in 39. And when they got back to Poland, it wasn't safe to stay there. Their factory had been nationalized and people were being killed. So they, with the help of UNRWA, ended up in Germany, in Berlin, and then from Berlin went to the displaced persons camp in Stuttgart. And it's always been extraordinary to me to think that people who survived something as unimaginable as the Holocaust would nonetheless have enough optimism to have children and to bring children into a world that they obviously believed was going to be a lot fairer and better than the one they had just emerged from. So I was born on July the 1st, which was no big deal in Germany, 1946. My sister 2 years later. My father practiced law. He taught himself English, and the Americans hired him in Stuttgart. It was, all of my memories of Stuttgart are very happy ones. I spoke German. It's amazing to me that German was the first language that they wanted me to speak. They spoke Polish to each other, and I spoke Yiddish to my grandmother. But I guess they wanted me to feel that I was part of the world I was born into. I never heard any rancor about the Germans. But when I asked my father about it many years later, why was German my first language? Why was there no bitterness? I never heard any bitterness in the house. He said, I hate war, but I do not hate Germans. So I grew up feeling very happy, very positive, because that was the house I was in. And they never expressed with tears their losses. They always answered my questions. I was so curious because I couldn't process what they had been through. I mean, the facts didn't make any sense to me, but they never cried. And now, as you know, whenever I speak about their experiences, I find that I always do, because it's coming now. I can feel it, because they were so remarkably strong and happy and felt so lucky that we were in Canada and that we had been finally allowed in. As you know from Irving Abella's remarkable book, None is Too Many, it was not easy to get into Canada. But they felt so lucky that they were here and ready to start life all over again. And it was a great life, and they never looked back.
Is that a picture of them on the wall behind you?
Yes, it is. Those are my parents, and that's a picture of them, the only surviving picture of them with my brother, who was 2.5 when he was killed.
In what year did your father die?
We found out that he had cancer just before my second year exams at law school. I went to law school because When we came to Canada, he went to the Law Society to ask what tests he had to write in order to become a lawyer in Canada, because he had qualified working for the Allies in Germany and thought that he would be able to do the same in Canada. And they told him he couldn't be a lawyer because he wasn't a citizen. So that was the moment I decided I was going to be a lawyer. I was 4 without any idea what that meant, but it just felt so unfair to me that he couldn't be what he was, and so I was going to be it.
Can you imagine? I know you have thought of this over the years, but can you imagine what he would have thought to have seen his daughter sworn in as a justice on the Supreme Court of Canada?
I cannot, but let me tell you, I think this journey has been incredulous to all of us. I mean, when you come to Canada as an immigrant, as a refugee, never mind female, I didn't know any lawyers growing up who were women. Everything was inconceivable. He would have thought nothing of the fact that I was a lawyer, because they both encouraged me. Nobody else thought that it was possible because girls weren't lawyers, but they didn't see any reason why I couldn't be if I wanted to be. But the rest, becoming a judge, doing all of the other Royal Commission, all of those other things that I ended up doing, and particularly the Supreme Court, would have been for them the most extraordinary, magical conclusion of a magical life in Canada. So
well, let's go back. Can I take you back to when you're 29 years old? And that's an age at which most lawyers are trying to build their legal careers. And you get appointed to be a judge at that young age. What made you even want to be a judge at that young age?
Nothing made me want to be a judge. I didn't want to be a judge at that age. This is Roy McMurtry at his gutsiest and his most innovative and risk-taking.
He was the Attorney General of the day.
He was the Attorney General of the day. He eventually became my Chief Justice on the Court of Appeal, and one of the most influential adults in my life outside of my own family. So he dug down and decided there were no women on the family court bench in 1976. Actually, I have to say, I don't think I ever saw another woman in a courtroom when I was practicing law. Maybe 1 or 2, but it was far from regular, and there were only 2 women on the Supreme Court of Ontario at the time. Roy McMurtry decided to appoint a woman to the bench. I'm not sure he could find anybody else, so he phoned me. I went into his office. He looked down at, I was 7 months pregnant. He looked down and he said, "When did that happen?" I said, 7 months ago. I mean, I'd only met him once before. And he said, "Well, it's going to cabinet on Monday. Do you want to be a judge?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds fantastic." And it's because it never occurred to me that that was possible. I didn't think for a second, was this good for my career, bad for my career? It was somebody handing me an incredible opportunity to do something I'd never dreamed I could do. So it was a very, very tough job. But it felt so important, and I never regretted doing it. It actually taught me how to be a judge and to understand that you have to look at the people in front of you from their eyes and not from the top down as a judge. It's not about you. It's not about your family. It's not about your experiences. It's about how they are navigating their lives and what you can do not to make it worse.
Now, whenever someone is the first of anything, it's sort of an obligatory question to ask whether that was important to them. So apologies for the predictable question here, but in 2004, you were the first ever Jewish woman and refugee appointed to the Supreme Court in Canadian history. How important was that to you?
Oh, monumental to me. I mean, now knowing where I came from and how I appeared in the world and out of what I appeared in the world, to go from that place, surviving, to parents who had survived the Holocaust and lost everything because they were Jewish, and then to be the first Jewish woman from that displaced persons camp to end up on a Supreme Court of Canada. To this day, I can't get over how grateful I am that that journey has taken place in this country. All those doors that opened up in my lifetime in Canada, all those opportunities that the country gave me, all of the risks it allowed me to take, and obviously with a soft landing, I had no idea where some of my choices would take me because I never had an end game. I never said one day I want to be on the Supreme Court, or I would never have done all the professional things that I did, most of which were hugely controversial. But it was Canada that said, go for it. Doesn't matter whether you're female or Jewish or refugee or immigrant, we will make room for you. And I think that's the Canadian story. That's what I cling to, that we have a country that says to the people who come here, and we are, after all, a nation of immigrants, be who you are and do what you can based on who you are. We're not demanding assimilation the way other countries have, especially the Americans, which has a different political DNA, of course, where they see equality as everyone being the same, which is impossible. No one is the same. Our model is integration. You can assimilate if you can or want to, but you can also come into the country based on your identity and who you are, as long as you understand that there are core national values and nothing collides with that. To the extent that your identity does not harm those core values, feel free. So it's a Canadian journey for me. It's a Jewish journey. It's a Canadian journey. And it's a female journey. I mean, all of those parts, it's a kaleidoscope, isn't it? All of those parts came together on that day in 2004 as a result of Irwin Cotler as the Attorney General and Paul Martin as the Prime Minister, as it did when Brian Mulroney appointed me to the Court of Appeal with Kim Campbell in 1992, and Bill Davis with Roy McMurtry in 1976. So I am the product of their generosity. And I can tell you, Steve, I was determined not to let them down or make them think this was a mistake. I knew there would be others behind me. I hoped there would be other people like me, more women, more Jewish people, more immigrants, more refugees. And I understood that if I messed this up, it was going to be harder for them. So I worked really hard not to mess it up and to do what I could to show that, of course, those identities don't mean you can't do the job. It just arbitrary exclusionary practices that said women can't, Jewish people don't, immigrants aren't. I mean, they're ridiculous, arbitrary attributions. So Canada's moved away from all of that, and I am a beneficiary of all of it.
You've been involved with obviously a great number of decisions. And I wonder, is there one that really stays with you for whatever reason? Because you think it moved the yardsticks the most, or it was the most difficult for you to decide, or it was the most heartfelt story that will stay with you forever? Which is the one, if there is one?
You're right. It's a very, very tough question. I really feel about every single one of them that I'm glad I decided the way I did. But if I had to look back and see what of my work I feel the proudest of, in a way, although that's not even fair, the hardest was the Royal Commission on Equality and Employment that was created by Lloyd Axworthy and then implemented by Flora MacDonald and Brian Mulroney. And the reason, I think, is because when I did it in 1983 and 1984, it was a 1-year, $1 million Royal Commission on barriers to employment for women, Indigenous people, persons with disabilities, and what we call visible minorities. 60% of the population, $1 million 1 year. At the same time, there was a 3-year Royal Commission with 7 people headed by a Court of Appeal judge from Quebec on baby seals. And I was a provincial court judge doing a federal Royal Commission. So I traveled across the country for 16 weeks and met with each of the 4 groups, plus business representatives and labor representatives in each of those cities, to try to figure out not so much what the barriers were, because those groups were very explicit about what was in the way of their having a chance to show what they could do, but to try to figure out what equality means, because the Supreme Court had not yet decided what equality means. And so I spent a lot of time reading Bentham and Hobbes and Locke and Aristotle and Plato and every single case that the Americans had ever decided under their equality provision, the 14th Amendment. And what I ended up with was deciding I did not like the American approach because it was Aristotelian. Everyone is treated the same. Anatole France's aphorism, the rich and the poor have the same right to sleep under bridges, beg in the streets, and steal bread. I mean, can't treat people the same. Someone in a wheelchair needs a ramp to get into a building. If you treat them the same as everyone else, then able-bodied people, that doesn't make any sense. Women everybody's different. So it occurred to me that we needed a new model. So learning from, remember Isaiah Berlin's line, there's no pearl without some irritation in the oyster. Reading jurisprudence that I didn't like, I had to figure out what it was that I didn't like. And what I realized was Canada was founded by 2 distinct groups at the constitutional table. The Indigenous community, I leave as part of I'm talking about the constitutional bargain. So we came together as a country as 2 distinct groups who were allowed to retain their differences in Confederation and were equal based on those differences. And I thought, the human rights model is freedom from discrimination based on identity. Why not make that what equality means? So I developed, the report took me, I write by hand, Steve, isn't that embarrassing? Computers and I don't get along, but I'm very good at email. Reply, send, and forward, I am the expert. But I write everything by hand. So I wrote 300 pages in 3 months of the report. And I took 1 month to write the first 18 pages on what equality means, and decided it meant treating people as equals based on their differences. And that was, I think, it was picked up by the Supreme Court of Canada in its first equality decision. And why that was so significant to me, aside from the fact that nobody does royal commissions thinking they're ever going to be implemented, I was hoping it would be a good policy paper for policymakers and universities to debate. But the Supreme Court of Canada adopted that definition of equality and discrimination in its first equality case. And the case was about a lawyer in British Columbia who was not allowed to practice because he wasn't a citizen. So they used my words in the Royal Commission to strike down the provision that had kept my father out of the profession. That was 1989. He, of course, died in 1970, never lived to see the commission or definition of equality. But for me, it was a gift to him that my words had helped other Canadians to not be arbitrarily deprived of the chance to contribute to Canada. So it was, of all of my decisions, none of which I regret, all of which I'm proud of for different reasons. That was the one I think that meant the most in the end.
That's beautiful. We have just a few minutes left here, and I want to take you back to what I think was another important moment in your career, which funnily enough has absolutely nothing to do with the judiciary. It's 1988. Canada is in the midst of one of its, you know where I'm going. Canada's in the midst of one of its most historically important elections.
Right.
And here comes the tape. Tony, roll it if you would.
The moderator for this occasion is the Honorable Rosalie Abella, distinguished jurist, legal educator, and chairperson of the Ontario Labour Relations Board.
Good evening. Tonight, the leaders of Canada's 3 political parties will have an opportunity to confront one another, exchange views, and share their vision with you.
How'd you like that experience?
Well, it just reminded me of what it can be like when you get somebody to do your makeup and your hair before a TV show, which I can't get during the pandemic, and hence my very convenient ponytail. Well, I'll tell you what I remember about that. I remember sitting there for 3 hours and thinking, this is really hard, and I've got to be on the ball because a lot of people are watching, and I have to be really fair, or try to be really fair. And when it was over, Steve, Itchy, my husband, was in the studio, and I always used to call my mother after my these kinds of things. She was so important to me in every conceivable way. She helped me with the kids. She was probably the biggest cheerleader outside of my husband that I ever had. Anyway, I called her after the debate, and she said, you kept interrupting the Prime Minister. I said, but I wasn't allowed to think of anybody as a Prime Minister. These were 3 candidates. And she said, but you interrupted so many times. And I remember my stomach fell. And I thought, well, okay, so I had no plans for a career after this anyway. And I remember that was the free trade exchange, I remember. And then the decision was, do I let them go at each other, or do I stop the fracas and say, no, we don't do this. Anyway, so I made the judgment call. This is what you do, I guess, when you're a moderator. And it had never been this way in any debates. I watched Antonine Maillet do her French debate the day before, and I thought, oh, this is easy. I can do this. But it tells you a story about Prime Minister Mulroney too, because 4 years later, whatever his views were about how I moderated that debate, he appointed me to the Court of Appeal. Didn't have to. Could have been perpetually angry or annoyed or whatever.
Well, we should set that up because that was a great night for John Turner. That was the moment where he said, I believe with you've sold us out. With one stroke of a pen, you've sold us out because of the free trade deal. You remember what you were thinking when Turner went after Mulroney in that moment?
I was thinking, do I cut them off, or do I let them have the heated exchange that they want to have? And that you never know you often don't know when you're in the midst of something how time or history will end up judging your call, your decision. And I was very much of the view that I would do the best I could. Actually, this is what judges do all the time. We do our best, and we hope that history will judge the decision to have been the right one at the time, because you can't know in the moment. And here's another aphorism: fish don't know that water's wet. So all I knew was that I had that quick call to make, and for better or worse, I let them have their intense exchange.
And it was memorable. I have one last question for you, which is, given that you are born on July 1st, I don't know if you believe in this kind of stuff, but was it kind of meant to be that you would end up in Canada?
God, I hope so. It sure feels like it was. And I used to question my father and say, how come we don't live in New York? That's where Broadway is. That's everything I thought of the United States and that I love about the United States. The Algonquin Round Table, Broadway, culture, the arts, that was in New York. But I was young, and I now realize that they ended up bringing my sister and me to absolutely the best country we could be in. Now, July the 1st this year, no snowbirds, no fireworks, no nothing. But to turn 75 on July the 1st, when here's the other thing that happens when you come from what I come from. You never take anything for granted. I never dreamed that I would even still be alive at 75. It's one of the reasons I never gave interviews up until now. I wasn't going to tell anybody this is how I've done it. I haven't done it until I'm done. And it wasn't until I said to them I was satisfied that I had children who were happy, wonderful, nice people, and a husband who was still the best partner anyone could hope for, that I would start giving interviews. Because you know when you're Jewish, you don't want to tempt fate. So here I am. I made it to 75. I have no idea how much longer it will be, but I look back and say I'm so glad they brought us to Canada. And I'm so glad my birthday is on Canada Day.
Amen to that. Madam Justice Abella, this has really been a great honor for you to spend so much time with us here on TVO tonight. Thank you for doing this, and good luck with whatever comes next.
Thank you, Steve. It was such an honor and a pleasure to be here on your show. Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Monday, September 6, 2021. Tomorrow, we begin season 16 of the agenda, and we'll get right into it with a look at what Ontario voters want to hear from the federal parties looking for their support in this 44th general election. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.